All right, this is theme part 2. In part 1, we reviewed what theme is and what theme isn't. In part 2, we're going to be focusing on how to figure out what the theme of a story might be and what things you can use to help you out. You'll even get a little bit of practice. Okay, don't forget to have your guided notes out. Stop and take notes every time you see the pencil. The pause button will be there to help you remind you as well. And use the rule of 5, and you can pause more times than when the pause actually comes up. Let's review some key points about theme. First of all, most of the time as you read a story, the theme's not going to be stated for you. It's always going to be indirectly shared. So you have to be able to look at the clues from the story to help you figure it out. Secondly, you have to have clues or things to back you up when you have a theme. If you cannot use the story itself, events, characters, etc., to explain why you think that theme is there, then it's probably not a theme that's going to work. The other thing to consider is that you have to have information or evidence from all parts of the story, from the beginning, middle, and end, and not just from one part. Third, most meaningful stories are going to have more than one theme, and that is not surprising. Most stories, good stories, are going to be complex, and so they can have more than one message. Fourth, it's okay to have a difference of opinion about what the main theme is. In other words, there's not necessarily one right answer. There are better answers, and there might be answers that aren't as good, but there's not going to be a for sure right answer. First of all, because there's often going to be more than one, and second of all, we view life differently. However, please don't forget number 2. If you cannot back up a theme with evidence, it really isn't a theme. Number 5, it's possible to express the same thing in different words. So you may have the same idea and you say it differently, and it's still going to be okay. And finally, as you're trying to figure out the theme of a story, decide first what subjects it covers, and then go from there. Okay, pause and make sure that you've written down in your own words these 6 key points. All right, so how does the story give us clues to the theme? Well, there's 4 different things that we're to cover: characters, conflict, plot, and title. As we go over each one, record in your notes what you need to think about for each one and how it helps you figure out the theme. Let's look at characters first. One thing to consider is, how do the characters change throughout the story? And what does the character learn or realize? As an example, you can take the Hunger Games. Katniss experiences a fair amount of change over the course of all 3 books. Her relationships with people especially change. So you have her relationship with Gale, you have her relationship with Peeta, you even have her relationship with her sister, her mother, with Haymitch, and a variety of other people. If you look how those relationships change and what she learns about each of the people in her life, you might start to think that maybe the theme is something about struggle helps define who we really are, because it is through the struggles that those changes occur. Okay, pause and write down how looking at the characters can help us understand what the theme might be. Okay, conflict and resolution. The conflict or the struggle of the story can, again, point us in the direction of what the theme might be. Take, for example, the story of Cinderella. Her conflict is that her stepmother is mean and tries to keep the sweet Cinderella from anything good. All right, well, how is that conflict resolved? Because she's so good and kind, she ends up winning the prince and becoming queen over her family, thus effectively getting rid of the conflict that she was dealing with. So that could lead to a theme of goodness will triumph over evil. Cinderella is good, stepmother was evil. In the end, Cinderella wins. Therefore, in the end, goodness will win. Pause and make sure you write down how conflict and the resolution point you to the theme. All right, number 3 is plot. We want to consider the plot are all the events that happen throughout the story. What things do happen to the character? How does one event lead to another? What kinds of events seem to be repeated over and over again? For example, take Harry Potter. Voldemort is always trying to get him, but in the end he doesn't win. Okay? And Harry Potter's friends almost always help him out. Well, that might lead us to some subjects that would lead us to some themes. So maybe the theme is something to do with evil, because Voldemort is there, and is trying to get Harry. There must be something related to evil that could be a theme. The other one, maybe there's a theme about friendship and friends, because his friends are always there, almost, to help him out. Okay, pause and write down how plot can point us in the direction of what the theme is. All right, finally, the title. With the title, you really have to think about, well, what big idea does it point out to us? Or what parts of the story does it highlight that might point us to the theme? Okay, so how does the story relate to the title relate to the story? What big idea or subject does the title point to? The title in and of itself isn't necessarily going to give us the theme, but it will point us in the right direction. Let's look at some examples. Take the Hunger Games and Cinderella again. What possible themes, subjects could they introduce? Well, the Hunger Games is about fighting for something. Well, maybe the theme has a message about what it means to fight for something. In Cinderella, the theme subject of goodness. Well, what does the story teach us about goodness? And there you might have your theme. Okay, pause and write down in your own words how the title might point us in the direction of the theme. Okay, let's look at some case studies. First, we're going to look at Remember the Titans. Look at each of those 4 things: characters, conflict, plot, and title. Well, we've got characters in Remember the Titans that are both black and white and have to make choices about how they will treat each other. Some characters learn to accept the others, and some do not. Okay, let's look at the conflict. Here, the football players have to figure out how to come together as a team. They are able to resolve it successfully, and they win the state championship, and they learn to treat each other with respect, at least for the most part. Plot, lots of things happen. The high school hires a new black head coach. People take that offensively. There's this struggle. They have to put the team together. They take them to the summer training session, and they have to do all sorts of things to try to get them to work together as a team. When they go back, they have to keep trying. Even though they were successful out at the training session, there are still problems that come up. And some characters choose to still fight against the blacks, having blacks and whites together, although many of them learn to figure that out. Okay, the title, and here's an example of where the title actually shows up in the story, and you want to look at that. What do the characters have to say about the title? Here, when Coach Boone talks about remembering the Titans, he explains that the Titans were greater than the Greek gods. And he wants people to remember their team as being great too. So for him, that means being successful and working together both on and off the field. So his explanation of what it means to remember the Titans can point us in the direction of what the theme might be. Okay, so we put all of that together. We can look at some possible themes. Perhaps the theme is in unity there is strength, or success comes from being united. Those are a couple of possibilities. Go ahead and write down in the guided notes, what other possible themes could you draw from the characters, conflict, plot, and the title as it is written out in your guided notes? Okay, so take some time to write some down of those ideas. Make sure you pause to do that. All right, let's look at case study number 2. This is Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. If you're not familiar with the story, don't worry, because we're going to go over all the different events. So one thing I want you to think about is, as we go over the story, is what does the story say about jealousy? So keep that in mind as we go through. All right, let's look at the characters. Well, we first, of course, have Snow White, and we have the seven dwarfs, and we have Prince Charming, and finally we have the Wicked Queen, who is Snow White's stepmother. Now, if you look at all those characters, which one looks evil? Well, the Queen does. So that might give you a hint of where this story might be going. All right, what's the conflict? Well, the conflict is that the Queen is jealous that her stepdaughter Snow White is more beautiful than herself. Remember, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Well, that's finally resolved when the Queen falls off a cliff. Therefore, no more problems. She can't be jealous anymore because, well, she's not alive. Let's look at some of the events in the plot. Once the Queen realizes that Snow White is more beautiful than she is, she sends Snow White into the woods to fend for herself. She sends a hunter after her, but fortunately for Snow White, he decides not to hurt Snow White. The Queen finally dresses up as an old witch and takes a poisoned apple to try to get Snow White to eat it. And as mentioned previously, this Queen falls off a cliff, and Snow White is rescued by Prince Charming, and of course that happens with a kiss. All right, let's look at the title briefly. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay, there they are. Do you notice that the Queen is not even mentioned at all? If she's not there in the end, what might that say about jealousy? All right, using the chart that's in your guided notes, decide what you think the theme of Snow White is for the subject of jealousy. You might, and then add if there are any other themes that you can pick out about something other than jealousy. Make sure you write that down in your guided notes. Pause so that you have time to do that. All right, that's the end of our video for theme part 2. Don't forget that you need to write your summary for the video on your note page as well as your hot question. And make sure that your notes are complete and submit them to Scooge before you come to class. In fact, before school starts on the day that it's due. If you used a paper copy for any reason, make sure you take a good quality picture of it, load it into Notability, make the picture large enough to fill the page before submitting it. If the picture is blurry or the picture is not large enough, I may not be able to grade it. All right, that's all, folks.